Welcome everyone, and it's so nice to see the familiar faces, but also it's always great to see some new faces. So this is part 3 of the emotional intelligence that we've been doing for the last few Wednesdays. So keep an eye out for our next session. We may be looking at a stress management in June. So please keep an eye out for that. It is in such high demand. That's why we keep on repeating it. So keep an eye on your newsletters. Okay, and let's see what we are going to do in part 3 for today. So for those of you who know me, I'm Cecilia Denton. I'm the owner and an industrial psychologist of PTES Consulting. And today we're going to look at emotional intelligence. And just a quick thank you to Charlene from the HR Talk that always arranges these sessions for us and sets up the links and the adverts and all of that. All right, so let's just jump right into it. Why are we talking about emotional intelligence? So a lot of people ask, but what is it? What does it look like? How do I immediately start addressing it and develop it? So let's just look at a key definition. So noticing and understanding emotions in oneself is considered one of the 4 key ingredients of emotional intelligence. So mindfulness can help one to develop emotional intelligence by increasing one's understanding of your own emotions. This is very important. Forget about other people for now. If you don't know what's going on with you, then you can't understand other people. So the first thing you want to do is there will always be a subjective experience, and that will trigger the emotions that you're feeling. Also, before you experience the emotion, there will be thinking about that subjective experience, which is causing the emotion. So that is the same in every single person. So even if you just have the 3 things in your head, there's actually a 4th thing. But the first thing is subjective experience that happens. Then you have a way of thinking about it. Then that will elicit an emotion in you. And the 4th thing, the last thing, is you will have an action to combat what is happening. So the action could be, now I scream, I show my irritation, I drive recklessly, whatever. But every single person has got the 4 steps. An emotion does not just exist. A lot of people will tell me, yeah, but I'm just stressed. Yeah, but it's so much just everything. There's usually a trigger. There's actually always a trigger. The word usually is not even correct. There's always a trigger. There's always a thing that happens. And that elicits the thinking, that causes the emotion, and then we have an action to combat that emotion. And remember, it can be positive or negative. Don't always think that it's negative. I think sometimes we link emotional intelligence and emotions, we always link it to negative. It can be anything. That is the part of emotional intelligence. It can be happiness, sadness, excitement, anxiety. It can be anything. Right. And then since the practice of mindfulness involves noticing one's current thoughts and feelings without judgment or interference, one learns to observe different emotional states. So can you see what we did there? So for you who were here 2 weeks ago when we were addressing the actions of the astronaut, you will remember Lisa Nowak. We looked at what she was doing. Well, we tried to look at what she was doing without judgment and interference. It was quite difficult because her actions were so weird. You would think of her as, a lot of people may say, a little crazy. But what we tried to do in the session was to look at what she was doing, thinking and feeling without judgment or interference. So it's quite difficult to do that. It's really a skill to not judge other people. It's really a skill. And monitor and gauge your own when you deal with other people. No judgment is a very difficult thing. Then one learns to observe different emotional states. So in line with this notion, Fieldman et al. Found that mindfulness is positively correlated with increased clarity of feelings, attention to feelings, and lower distraction. So let's just look at that. Clarity of feelings, attention to feelings, and lower distraction. So even here where I'm sitting today, for those of you who don't know how old I am, I'm already 50, which means I've been around the block quite a few times already. And still sometimes there will be experiences where I don't have clarity of feelings. Don't think that you need to know exactly what's going on immediately. Give yourself time as well. Give yourself just a minute to also create that clarity of the feelings, and then pay attention to the feelings. And lower distraction means that you can actually focus on it. So one of our biggest problems today is social media. We're on our phones permanently, and that creates distraction. So when you're on your phone, just pay attention to how quickly an hour goes by when you scroll through social media. An hour is like nothing. And so lower distraction will help you to get in touch with your feelings. So if you go for a run or have your coffee, put away the cell phone, just be with yourself. That will help you to increase your attention to yourself. Just as intellectual intelligence is manifested through reading and learning, emotional intelligence can be fostered through mindfully attending to current emotional states. Right, let's look at we are emotional creatures. That's a good thing until our emotions get out of balance and lead us to say or do something that we later regret. So it's fine that we are emotional creatures. Don't think that you shouldn't have the emotion. Don't think that it should not be an overwhelming emotion. Don't think it should not be a sad or excited emotion. You just want to be aware of the emotion. Leave the emotion. It's fine. It should be there. The thing is, we want to be aware of the emotion, and what will be even better if we can determine what caused that emotion. That's all you want to do. And then emotional intelligence helps you to make emotions work for you instead of against you. That's the other thing. You want your emotional intelligence to work for you and not against you. For most of us, because we're so unaware, it works against us. Okay, so emotional intelligence is the ability to identify, understand, and manage emotions. It's like a superpower because it can make you better at everything you do. But like any ability, it needs to be trained and sharpened. So you can train and sharpen it. You can get better at it. You can really improve it quite significantly once you know what it is. Now, let's look at IQ or EQ. So what is EQ? EQ is a shorthand for emotional intelligence. Think of it like IQ, but it's for emotions. So when you hear that someone's got a high EQ, it usually means that they're skilled at leading a team, collaborating with others, managing difficult situations, or all of the above. So, but become aware of the EQ and the IQ thing. All right, so how do you know if you are emotionally intelligent? Okay, so let's look at this. So this is a summary of what emotional intelligence is. So if you look at the diagram on the right, you will see there's a few pointers. So in some cases, some people would summarize it according to this structure, and then other researchers would have maybe a combination of different a different cluster of concepts or constructs, but it's usually close related. All right, so this particular diagram on the right-hand side here, there is actually a test that is available in South Africa that you can do, and that will give you a response on this diagram here, and it can be used for coaching and development and that, and it's a pretty good one. Some of these things are quite costly, but it's a pretty good one. All right, so then emotional intelligence is a spectrum. Everyone has strengths and you've got weaknesses. And sometimes you will be weaker than other days. It's fine. The thing, you want to be aware of it. You do not have to be perfect. You do not have to not experience emotion. So I'm going to repeat that, because a lot of people think emotional intelligence is to not have the stress. It's to not have the emotion. You want to try to regulate it. Firstly, understand it and see it as it coming, and then try and regulate it as well as you can. But don't suppress or squash things. That's not the point. Right. Then the key is to learn how to leverage your strengths and mitigate your weaknesses. So when you're emotionally intelligent, you understand yourself at a deeper level. That means recognizing both your strengths and your weaknesses. You're confident about what you contribute and where you need help from others. This one is very important. To determine when you need help from others. really be aware of that. There are certain things that you do not have to do alone. If you need to get help from a professional, do it and go get it. Do not shy away from that. Do not think that it's unnecessary. Be curious about it and explore it. Then you're also in tune with your emotions. And once again, can you see you're in tune with your emotions? You're not suppressing it. You're not controlling it even. You are aware of it. Okay, so let's ask one simple question. So if you want to start building your emotional intelligence, how do we start? So the question is, when and how do my emotions work against me? So this is a critical question. When and how do my emotions work against you? So for example, did your temper cause you to say or do something that you regret? Or maybe you were in an extremely joyful mood and you agreed to do too much. Oh, I do that one a lot. When did you do or say something that you regret? Or the opposite, when were you so in such a good mood you just agreed to too much, or you promised too big of a discount, or whatever it can be in your case. So also think about how you're affected by unpleasant emotions like anxiety or fear. These emotions aren't all negative. They can keep you out of danger. So however, they can also prevent you from making a decision or taking action or trying out new things. So can you see the spectrum? It's not black or white. And sometimes you are a little bit weaker than other times. Sometimes you are stronger than other times. You only want to have an awareness around it. Your emotions can also work against you when it comes to your relationships with others. And this is why it's important to learn about EQ, because it's about your relationships with other people as well. So for example, maybe you lack empathy. Don't take that the wrong way. Most of us lack empathy at times, but the empathy muscle is one that takes hard work to strengthen. So, but for now, it's important to know that an inability to understand the feelings and emotions of others can cause you to become callous to their problems. This can be extremely damaging to your relationships at home or work. Also, remember, it depends on how you were brought up. Sometimes people are a little bit more tough-minded or hardened because of their upbringing. They've just learned how to reserve their energy and contain it where they can actually manage it. So, but it doesn't matter. Whatever it is that you're feeling or experiencing, if you're aware of it, and also it's good to manage it in terms of where are you going to hand out or dish out your energy and your empathy. So look at the other end of this extreme. You could also be suffering because you show too much empathy. In other words, you relate too closely to the feelings of others, leaving you emotionally exhausted. In essence, you've overworked your empathy muscle. That happens a lot. So be aware of the spectrum and where you fall on the spectrum. And remember, you'll move up and down on the spectrum. Sometimes you'll have more empathy and care, and other times you're thinking, this is it, I've done enough now. And the boundary is healthy. Do not feel bad about your boundary. So, but know the extremes, see the extremes, and just be aware of it. Okay, so if you struggle to answer the question, when and how do my emotions work against me, try to ask for help. So this is the place where you may not always like the feedback, or you may feel vulnerable to the feedback, but prepare yourself for the feedback and stick your head out and try and see if you can get feedback from someone that you trust, who knows you well. This is the other thing. You want to get feedback from someone that you know well and that you trust. So it's someone that you know you could get accurate feedback from. And ask them to share instances where they've seen your emotions get the best of you. So brace yourself, though. You may be surprised with the answer you get. We all have a blind spot, remember? And it's fine. It's fine, but we all have a blind spot that we can't see, that other people can see, but we can't see it. So, but don't worry. Remember that emotional intelligence is a spectrum, meaning that, like everyone, you have emotional strengths and weaknesses. Learning to ask yourself and others this question, put yourself on a path to developing self-awareness, which is the first step in building emotional intelligence. Once you've reached a certain level of self-awareness, you can start working on a plan to leverage your strengths and mitigate those weaknesses. That's what I call making emotions work for you instead of against you. And the fact that you're reading or listening to this right now is a sign that you are ahead of most other people. There's a reason why you've registered and logged into this. It's because you're curious about it, you want to learn more. And firstly, just understanding is going to help you. All right, so now let's look at an example. Research shows us that nurses who work with terminally ill patients run a higher risk of developing compassion fatigue, a condition of physical and emotional depletion associated with caring for patients in significant emotional pain and physical distress. You know that some of these nurses and caregivers, they are just a different breed. It's like they're born to do that work. But anyone needs to keep an eye on their own boundary and their own mental health and their own mental state. So it's easy for caregivers like these to focus on their needs for their patients at the expense of their own, putting them on a path to burnout. So very, very important. This is now on the other extreme scale. Also, I think sometimes leaders at work, managers and leaders at work, if you don't understand EQ, you may think it means that I'm lowering my standards, I'm tolerating negative or slow behavior or poor performance. I don't mean slow behavior, that sounds horrible. You know what I mean? It means that they need to be too patient or lowering their standards, dropping quality, things like that. That does not mean that at all. You want to put yourself in your subordinates or your team's shoes to know, do they have the tools and the equipment to work? Do they have what they need? Do they feel at ease and comfortable to ask for ask questions and ask for what it is that they need? That is important. It is not just literally listening to people and not focusing on what it is that you need to do, because you can look at it and apply your empathy from a goal-orientated perspective. And then technology has also created problems for empathic persons. For example, one series of studies revealed that people were experiencing high levels of stress due to their use of social media. So what was the problem? As they became aware of friends' various struggles, like the loss of a loved one or the stay in the hospital, their own stress level increased. Now, I can actually also say the opposite, because there was also a study done that showed depression levels increased because people were only posting the positive things of their own lives. And upon reading that, people are thinking, but my own life is not that great. I think you're all aware of that. But be aware of how the news and how these things affect you and the people around you. So be very aware of that. And that's why they will always say, disconnect, disconnect, disconnect. And it's from social media. The problem was that social media allowed these persons to learn, I said that already, while the little sips of information sent through social media may not seem like much, but they can add up to a big gulp. So awareness of undesirable events in others' lives generates a cost in terms of increasing psychological stress, and with it, higher risk for physical and psychological problems that often accompany stress. So keep an eye on it. Be aware of what it is that you do at work. Be aware of what's happening at home. Be aware of how many times and how many hours you spend online. And I don't even want to say minutes. I want to say hours, because that's what we do. Actually, hours goes to waste. All right. And then, so what to do? So at work, if your job involves being around others much of the day, you may quickly find yourself emotionally exhausted. To combat this, schedule buffer time between meetings or time with others. Take shorter, more frequent breaks that allow you to recharge your emotional batteries. That is really such a simple technique, but having those small little breaks and doing one thing at a time. The whole multitasking thing, we do that when we are energized and when we are rested. It depletes fairly quickly. So keep an eye on that. You don't always have to multitask. Do one thing at a time. Focus at one thing. Take a quick break. Start with another thing. It's the oldest trick in the book. It's the simplest thing you can do. And when you are going through an emotionally charged time, I told most of you last week that my mother was in hospital. She was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and she's got dementia already. So in that time, it literally started when I started with the first emotional intelligence part 1. That was 3 weeks ago. And in the 3 weeks, it escalated incredibly quickly. But what I did in that time was to be aware of the emotions I was experiencing. I was prioritizing important things, delegating certain things. I was focusing a lot on my own sleep, did not cut on the coffee, which I should have done. I don't care, love the coffee. I would rather prioritize other things, but one thing at a time. And I took more frequent breaks, and I increased the exercise that I was doing in between. So it was still emotionally taxing, but I literally focused on my sleep and exercise, tried to do the healthy eating thing, but it definitely worked, and it's still working. Okay, so now at home, learn how to set boundaries, communicate those boundaries. Very important, communicate those boundaries. Very, very important. If you feel yourself reaching a limit, let your spouse or family members know that you need some time to yourself. Tell them that you're looking forward to spending time together, but mentally and emotionally, you'll be in a much better place after some time alone. So be aware of that. Communicate what it is that you need. It may not necessarily be quiet time. Maybe you want to be with people or whatever. Determine what it is that you need to recharge your batteries, because remember, introverts and extroverts recharge their batteries in different ways. Determine what is yours and tap into those, and do not feel guilty about it. And then at play, recreation should be a way to refresh and recover, but if you're not careful, it could end up doing the opposite. So if you find yourself especially exhausted after spending time with others, consider changing things up. If a certain friend is draining your energy, it doesn't mean that you have to completely avoid them. You may simply need longer breaks between getting together. Determine where you fall on your spectrum and on your continuum of emotions, and determine what is best for you, and then do it. Entertain it. Be curious about it and entertain it. Your empathy muscle can be a major source of strength, but only if you do work but only if you don't work to the point of breakdown. So work to understand your own emotional needs and take action to support those needs. And if you do, your empathy will be working for you instead of against you. So I just want to keep an eye on the time, because I want to make sure that we listen to some questions. Okay, but I want to give you an example. So let's do the example of the Alsatian. So this is not my words. This didn't happen to me. This is a story that I downloaded from, what's his name, Mark Manson. He's pretty good. He's pretty good when it comes to emotional intelligence. So this is now him saying this. So when I was quite small, my mother let me play out in the street when I was at home. We didn't have cars in those days. Yes, this is probably a Gen X speaking here. So we actually lived on a small hill, and of some 50 houses, and I enjoyed walking right to the top and then sailing down the hill on my scooter. So the trouble was, in the house at the top of the road lived an Alsatian dog, and occasionally it got out and prowled the street. So I was terrified of it. Unfortunately, at the bottom of the road, there was also an Alsatian. So it too occasionally got out, and I didn't like that one either. So one day I was playing with my brothers. The dog at the top of the road was out, which I discovered only when I got close to the house. To my acute alarm, it ran towards me, and in my terror, I raced down the hill, no doubt screaming, the dog in hot pursuit. This literally sounds like an example that happened to me, but anyway. My mother came out of the house, and 3/4 of the way down the hill, wondering what the fuss was all about, my mother screamed, "It's only a puppy." I expect it was trying to play with you. An insight into canine psychology I felt was not particularly helpful at that moment. So just to explain to you why I'm giving you this example of the Alsatian is this particular person that had this experience with a dog experienced this as an emotionally charged experience. and he developed an emotionally charged memory. So, of course, as a smaller child, he unintentionally exaggerated the size of the dog, the loudness of its barking, and the scariness of it. But this is how this person developed some sort of a fear or phobia of dogs. So I had some experiences with dogs. I don't have a total fear of dogs, but the slight fear that I have is also probably related to some incidents with dogs. So it should not necessarily depends on what has happened to you in the past, but I want you to become aware of things that scares you or that is emotionally charged for you. In some instances, an incident could debilitate you, but sometimes some of us, we know that we are worried about something or fearful of something. It may not be debilitating, but there could be an emotional connection to it. So explore yours. What is it that makes you fearful? What is it that scares you? And whether it's big or small, maybe issues with money, maybe issues will you be safe in certain situations? It can be anything. So explore what it is that drives you today and what makes you fearful. And remember, we don't have to understand everything. Don't make things a big issue. Explore them, be curious about them, ask questions around them. If it is a big thing, seek help and ask someone to help explore it with you. Other things will literally become more neutral as you are aware of them and as you figure it out and say, oh, maybe that's why I'm scared of dogs or fearful of not having money or whatever it is that your situation is. And so all I'm telling you today, be aware, be curious, and ask questions.